Hello, it's Pete the Bumbling Modeler. I'm back again. It's been a while since I've posted anything on YouTube, and I was just live catching up, but I've got a bit of time on my hands again. And I got this for Christmas, so I thought I'd make this a bit of a basis for another um, quick video. I do like the Tamiya 48 scale models, and a friend of mine knew this and bought it for me, so I'll rattle through the build of this relatively quickly without showing too much of it, because I really want to concentrate on the sort of weathering side of things more than the actual buildings. That seems to be what people look at the most. So, what do we get? I think this is the original boxing of the kit. It was a second-hand kit when my friend bought it me, but that's by the by. So we've got the basic truck. Instructions are just instructions, but I think this is what we're going for, these markings, because this is one of the Red Ball Express ones, which was the convoy system that ran through Normandy after the war. And that one, really, because it's got this yellow board on the front, so it adds a bit of colour to it. But I've also seen a lot of videos where they're looking pretty mucky and grimy, so it'll give me a chance to practice with weathering powders and dusts. So that's what I'll be making. The kit itself hasn't got a great deal of parts, so that's your sort of cab sprue, main body sprue, and that you've got two of those to wheels, so you end up with spare grills and all sorts. So I'll see what's there when we start to play with that, but I'm not yeah, I think about a quarter of that will end up getting used, so that's okay. And the reason I think this is one of the original kits is it's got one of these die-cast metal chassis. So the original 48 Tamiya kits had a metal chassis to give them a bit of weight, so they felt a bit more chunky in your hand. So I believe the modern ones might have some ballast weights, but yeah, it's listed as 2007 on that. So it's not the most detailed of chassis because of it, but it does have a bit of heft to it, some sort of zinc die casting. The only real difference with this and anything else is you need super glue to attach some of the suspension components to it, and some are screwed on rather than glued on. So I'll do my normal process. I've got my box for the parts there. I'll get everything off the sprues. I'll clean it all up. I'll see how it assembles into various chunks, and I'll come back when I've got sub-assemblies done. And then we'll start looking at painting it and weathering it, which is, say, what I want to focus on with this video. So I'll be back soon. Bye for now. There's no real cleanup, just a little bit flash off there. The one thing that did have a slight issue is when you tighten screws to hold this chassis, the axles onto the chassis, is you get a bit of twist and they get out of line. So I was going to do that again and probably glue those on and then give it a little tweak with the screws just to tighten it up later on, but that's all done without any problem. Wheels are done, that's fine. Spare wheels done. Petrol tank there. The joins down that side and that side. That side's a little bit rougher than I'd like, but you're never going to see that because that will be hard up against the chassis. Then the main body will be on top of that. So the bit that you will see is down there, and that's cleaned up perfectly without any filler at all. So the other things I've done is I wasn't sure you'd be able to get the driver in with the cab assembled, so I've loosely assembled that. There's my tweezers. Just to check the driver fits in afterwards, which you will do because the roof doesn't go on till later on and the windscreen doesn't go on till later on, so you can build the whole lot up, paint it, and then put the roof on, which is a different colour as the canvas, and pop the driver in before the weathering starts. So that's, we know we can do that now. As I said before, exhaust is staying off because I want to put a really rough rusty finish on that, and you can't do that when it's on the main body. But the one thing I have done is drilled out the end of the exhaust there, so it's got a little bit of a hollow, so when you look at it you see a hollow pipe. And this will what occupy me this evening. It looks like it's had a dose of the measles, but all of the inside faces of the truck bed have got ejector pin marks. Now, in themselves, they aren't that major because you won't see them, but you will. I want to web this and put a wash on it, and with the wash, it'll collect in every circular dent. So you'll have perfectly circular holes outlined and it'll look awful. So although in doing this, I lose some of the wood grain, that won't show up as much. So having circular marks. So what I've used is Mr. Surface 500, which is a thick primer basically. And I've used that as opposed to my normal super glue and talc is because it's a lot softer. So when you come in to rub these back, you're doing a lot less damage to the surface of the part than you would be if you're trying to hack your way through super glue. So all I've done is spent all night with a paintbrush putting little dabs in every one of those. Then I'm going to come in with a sanding stick and just gently hit the area of dent till I get a little circular dent or mark, not dent. Then if you twist that round in the light, if you've got it right, that'll be perfectly matte. That one, I don't know if you can see, but there's a little bit of a shiny bit just here, which means that Mr. Surface is lower than the surface of the plastic, so it'll still show as a dent needs filling. I knew this had happened because it does shrink back quite a lot. So what I'll do this evening is sand these back, go over and put a second dose of Mr. Surfacer on them, and we'll sand them back tomorrow. Then that'll be ready to assemble, and I may or may not try and reinstate the wood grain, but if I'm going to do that, all I will do is get a really coarse sanding stick and just go across the area so it scratches the surface of it, that will sort of blend in to what we've got. Like that. I don't really want to go wild on it. I just want to give it that sort of wood grainy sort of look. That's a job for another day. As I don't think the wood grain is going to be as significant as having a circular dot as a wash it's at. That'd stand out like a sore thumb. So hopefully get this sanded back and refilled tonight, and then carry on with the assembly tomorrow, and then we can start looking at painting and weathering, which is the main focus of this video. So I'll be back when I'm up to that stage. So there we go for a moment. Okay, time for an update then. Sorry. So the truck is basically ready for primer, but it's still in modular components. So things like the seats, exhaust, and little jerry cans, I'll paint them separately, mainly because there's a bit of bracketry around there that holds a jerry can in, which will be the standard olive drab. But I was gonna paint the cans a slightly different green just to make them stand out a bit, give a bit of texture and contrast. That's a spare wheel. You get two of the kit. I'll probably paint that up, and if I've got an area that looks a bit dodgy in the back, I'll just throw it in the back. I may use it, I may not. Seats will be a buff colour, so that's different. Driver I'll paint separately. We still have the exhaust and the rust. Steering wheel I've got to put in later because I've got to get the driver in and doing it. The only other thing I've done is that's a rifle rack there with a little rifle in it, and there's one each side of the cab. But there's only one driver, or one occupant rather than driver. So I've just scooped this one out, cut the rifle away, and scooped out channel areas where the rifles are missing, because I don't think you'd be in a position where you'd have a rifle without an owner. I think sort of standard policy is you carry your weapon with you all times. So if there isn't anyone in the passenger seat, there shouldn't be a rifle in there in my mind. So that just scoops out to make it done. As for painting, it's still modular, so back comes off. The only slight issue I had with that is these brackets here are different for the front and the back. So I started putting it together, then the brackets didn't line up, so I double checked, and yeah, that's part 23 and that's part 22 the other way around, so make sure you don't get those mixed up, but it all slings together okay. There's nothing to say there, it all went There should be a little hinge there, but I cut it off by accident, but that's all right, no one will ever see that. Chassis, I've left the spare wheel loose and the main wheels loose, so I'll paint them separately so we can get the tyre black on them, and then paint the hubs. So that's fair enough. I'll just give it a quick blast of green underneath. It's quite scant, the detail, so from side on and angles you can see it, but if you look directly underneath, it's clearly not a very accurate representation. So I don't expect I'm going to be picking this up anyway, but sorry, I've got a terrible cough at the moment. That's all good to prime. That's good to prime. The cab, I've kept the bonnet loose and glued this grille onto the front of the bonnet, so it does all line up when it goes on. Pop that on there, all lines up fine. But the reason I've done that is there's a radiator behind there that's meant to be painted black, so I'm going to spray the whole lot green, brush paint that in, then attach the bonnet afterwards so you see a bit of black through there. Cab roof I'll keep separate, obviously, because that's going to be a sort of tan colour. It's convertible thing, soft top. I've glued the mirror on now because you get a better bond going from onto plastic to plastic than plastic and paint. I'll probably snap that off several times during painting, but I'd rather it was on a good fix and didn't ping off and it just bent. So that's why we've gone with that. Say jerry cans will fit on there later on. I've put the windscreen on now, but I've held it on with this Ammo Ultra Glue, which is like a stiff PVA glue. So if I have to peel it off later, I will, but I've masked both inside and out. So if I get any paint creep underneath it and have to polish it back, I can't just snap that off. But I lined it all up with the Ultra Glue and then left that cab roof on for an hour or two just so it all hardened up in place. That's all right. I'll have to paint that green first and then primer, then green again. So if you see it from a different angle, you'll see the green. And before I glued it on, I went across that bottom edge with a Sharpie, black Sharpie, just so it had a black line. That way, when you look down at an angle, you don't see that silvery plastic. You see black like a rubber seal. So that'll be sprayed green in a minute. I'll let that harden when I go to the shops, then I'll come back and the whole lot will be primed, so there'll be that green undercoat. And that's about it, really. I'll get it primed up, I'll do some pre-shading, and I'll paint the overall green colour on, and I'll show you what I've done then and what the plans are from that point onwards. So I'll be back soon. Right, so we've spent a bit of time priming. As you can see, if I move the camera slightly, there's a lot for a small model. It won't be when it's all together. That's just some things are going to be easier to deal with separately and bring it all together once everything's olive drab. So whilst in the priming phase, I'll just move this out of the way. I did realise I'd made a small error on there, and I glued this tailgate the wrong way around, so these little reflectors were on the inside, not the outside. So I had to just gently tack on a bit of extra thin glue there to soften that joint, snap it off, reverse it, glue it back on, and then just lightly rub back these areas where the original glue had been, just to smooth that off and reprime it. And whilst I was doing that, I put a few fingerprints down the side. I'm wearing a glove, by the way, because they don't want greasy hands on it. I know this is, I've been eating crisps and all sorts tonight, so safety greasing every time. There's a few fingerprints on the inside from the glove and a few on the edge. I didn't overly worry about that. All I did was got some of the self-leveling thinners neat in an airbrush and just sprayed it over the areas where the fingerprints were and left it. And that thinned down the primer, which was still tacky at that stage. And I got rid of the fingerprints without any sanding or any sort of invasive operation. And then it's dried hard. It was a bit thin in those places, so they've been reprimed. So that's how you get around that if you do that as a problem. And since then, I've mixed a darkened mixture of the olive drab by adding some rubber black, and I've just gone round any areas like here where I think there's going to be a natural shadows. I've done that a little bit on the chassis there around the fuel tank, but not too much around the springs and around the cab, just to sort of give these areas. So when I then overspray with the olive drab, some areas will have an enhanced shadow and naturally stay dark. It's quite an old-fashioned method, and it's a little bit out of favour, but it's one I still like to give me a starting point. And it's almost lost under the spraying, so it doesn't really matter what you do. You just do it, and then at the same time, things like the exhaust and the steering wheel, I've just given them a solid coat of that dark greeny black, and they'll be considered painted. The exhaust will be weathered, and the steering wheel will be probably just gloss coated to make it look a bit shiny, and a bit of graphite put in the middle of it to make it look metallic. So next time you see it, it'll be in a solid coat of olive drab, and then I may try and do it on camera, I may not, just highlight some areas with olive drab mixed with a bit of buff just to get some highlights on it to increase the contrast. Then it'll be a coat of gloss paint and some pin washes just to highlight some detail. Then we'll put a satin on and go into the weathering properly when it's assembled. So that's where we are. I'm going to have a quick break now, and then this will come back as a painted model in subcomponents so we can see where we are. Okay, so next time we see it, we'll be up to that. Okay, so a couple of things have happened since was last filming. So I've gone round and sprayed the olive drab on the underside of everything. So I don't have to worry about that later on the back of that grille. So that's all done and dusted. But to me, that olive drab looks a bit too dark. So I think I'm probably going to muck about with a lighter shade of that. Wheels have all been sprayed up. All the centres have. And I'll paint the black outside of one of them so you can see how I do that. Then we'll probably be weathering them while everything else is drying off. And the other thing I did was the back of the load bed looked a bit empty, and I didn't want to buy anything extra for this kit, so I had some blue paper towel kicking round and some of this VMS paper shaper. So I made a folded mass, soaked it in that, pushed the spare wheel in, because there's 2 spare wheels in the kit, don't forget. So it sits in there rather than on it, and I'll prime that when it's fully dry. And we can paint that a sort of buff colour once we've sprayed the load bed olive green. So the next step will be getting the wheels painted. So I'll just get myself sorted out for that. Okay, I'm not sure how well this is going to look on camera actually, but there's 2 ways of doing it, or 2 ways I generally use to try and get myself some space. Firstly, it's just to spray everything black, then mask the outer wheel, and then spray the inner hub on these. I think it's going to be a bit better to do it this way. So I've got some rubber black there, and it's quite thin because I only usually use it spraying, so I always tip it back in the pot when finished. So it does thin down to an unknown ratio. And there's quite a distinct ridge on this wheel, so I'm going to try and get into a position where I can see what I'm doing. If you just touch the thin paint there, you can go quite neatly up into that ridge, and then have a nice broad black band that's make life a bit like on camera still just. You need to be as neat as you can, but don't forget this is going to have dust all over it, so it'll hide any slight splurges. And I'm tilting it down so the paint runs away from that band so it doesn't flood into it. It floods away. I suppose it's a bead, is it, when it's round by a wheel? Okay, so hopefully it'll stand out a little bit, but you'll see there's a nice crisp division between the olive drab and the black. So I'll do that on all the wheels, and then once it's dried, you can put a rather large bit of masking tape over there because it doesn't. You don't have to mask that circle perfectly. Then just spray the lot. So that's the reason I'm doing it that way. So you'll see them when they're sprayed, and you'll see what I mean. But yeah, with a bit of white tack, something, just make a disc, put it in that overlaps the black that's already there, then spray the rest to get that perfect finish that we're looking for. So I'll carry on with that off camera because I need to really steep into it, and then you'll see them when they're painted. Okay, so we're up to painting bits of the main shell now. So what I've got is the XF62, which I thought was too dark really on the last one, and I've added some yellow. So I've got, that was an empty container. I've emptied them both, so I've got the original dark as a reference to go back, and I've diluted the paint in this little glass jug, so it just clings to the sides. It's quite thin, and it's probably a bad habit, but I always test it out on the glove to make sure it's flowing right. Now that compressor's going to kick on and off, and it may become annoying. But what I'm trying to avoid is, let's get something over here, is this looking like a zebra with the harshness between the stripes. So what my plan is I shall go over some selected areas with that and leave gaps mid panel, and then I'll go over them again with an even lighter color, then blend it all in. I won't film a lot of it because, as I say, the noise starts getting nerves, but so it'll just be very edgy, so you can still see that dark line coming through. So you're still seeing that bit of shadow there, which is okay. That'll blend in a minute with what I'm going to do. Get all the ends of that covered. So that's didn't do that last time, did I? Cover this area. So it is a little bit lighter than before, and so that those shadows we put in are starting to stand out a little bit. So can do that either. Want to be in from every angle really, so yeah, did the backs. But again, I will say mist over a lighter colour than that again, and you'll see how it works out. And I'll see, because it's a bit of guesswork at the moment. So that's the chassis sort of done. Let's pick on the main bed. So this lightened colour, I want it along the edges. So I still want some of that darkness showing through. So it's awkward to hold at the moment, but the one that black colour on just to start to fade, and as the paint dries that should in theory come back. So you get the picture of that. I'm going to switch your camera off for now and come back on. What I did with the wheels was cut little circular masks. I just got a pair of dividers and cut holes in masking tape, stuck them over the centre. It didn't have to be that neat because we already painted the black hard rim, so it was just a case of putting it on so it covered the centre but didn't cover all of the black we put on, then give them a quick spray. And because they look a bit dark as well, I might just give the centres of those a bit of a wash over with a lighter colour. But first I do need to lighten what I've got, so that initial pass still a bit sticky. You can see just about, if the light's right, you can just see that dark bit of put on coming through, so it's just giving it that little bit of pre-shading. There's going to be dust all over this as well to blend it. So, oh, I did put my finger on that, but it doesn't matter because we're going to give this one a little whiz over with a lighter colour. Lighter colour down the centres, definitely. And probably the centre of all these panels, not so much that. And the upper edge coming down, and we'll just gently fade that all the way through. I've done all of it, the cab and everything. I'm just showing you on that bit. So what we need to do is get our initial base colour, chuck that back in the cup, give the airbrush a quick squeeze out. Oh, sorry, I turned off the compressor so I wouldn't deafen everyone. Doesn't have to be a massive clean because we're going in straight away. I'll switch it off again. Get a bit more of the yellow we had. It's getting a bit thin. This is your normal self-leveling thinners I'm just using to thin this out a little bit. I don't normally use flat yellow, so it's gone a bit old and stale. I'll get a new stirring stick as well so I don't contaminate it. Got a bit gloopy. So just chuck a bit more of that in there. I'm not measuring it, I just want to get a lighter colour, and we've gone too dark. I can always put in a bit more, too light, I can always put in a bit more. I think it probably needs to be a touch lighter actually. I can always sling in a bit more green. Let's call it that. And this will go back into the faded bottle when I've finished as well. And then I'll have a pre-faded one, but every time I do it, obviously it's going to be a bit more faded. So you've got to be a bit careful doing that. That's about that. Let's get a bit of paper towel. Not here, just wipe the edge of that bottle. Obviously when I'm spraying, I've got the extractor and I'm not when I'm showing you what's going on. Because you definitely wouldn't hear a thing with that. But we can reload the airbrush with the new even lighter mix. Put that out the way somewhere. Put the cap on because I'm bound to spill it if I don't. Look for spills around the airbrush, it doesn't dribble down into the cup. And we're going to just give it a quick squirt to get some of that through. And it shouldn't be dramatically lighter, just a little bit. Not that noticeably lighter, but we'll see how we get on. So first off, the centre of the bed is going to be more faded than the edges in my mind. So I left that centre out, and we're just going to lightly so you are getting that just mist out as well. It's thin, so it won't do much. And then we'll get a really thin coat and mist over the lot to blend it in. So you've got that centre section's a bit more faded the edges, so it gives that illusion of shadow. And we'll just go over the tops of these bars here, same way. It's awkward to hold this. I'm taking a chance. I'm not marking it, but then just along the tops of those, and we'll just let that come down the side of it where it's going to fade nearer the top, but not all the way down. We've got a little bit there we're going to blend in where my glove was. So it doesn't matter we've got lighter patches all over. It's meant to be a bit patchy. Top of that one. And the other thing I'm going to do is make sure it's a nice tight spray pattern and just go in the centre of these panels here just to further lighten them down. Little post shade effect. And I might go lighter again and just try and go down those, but I might dry brush them instead actually. That might be a better route to take. So that we want to get these edges, but we don't want to get bits on the shadow, on the rails there, bits around there. So it's just the lightest of coats in the centre of panels just to blend in what we've done. So if it's sensible I wouldn't touch that, but I'm not, so I will. That's a bit heavy on that one, but it'll shrink back. So I'm not going to do a great deal more than that, but what hopefully is showing is you're getting that green broken up a bit, so it's not just a big block of olive drab that's in your face. So you'll start, as it dries, that one probably needs a bit of a helping hand where I've been a bit heavy. But yeah, this is all we're trying to do is just get this so it's not one solid block of blurg. So on this fuel tank, this is going to be heavily stained anyway, but wouldn't fade too much in the middle of those, but we'll give the corners a bit of a go. And then tops of the bumpers definitely will be faded out a little bit, so we'll do that. And maybe the front faces of them. That diff looks a bit pale anyway, so we'll just give that a squeeze. So yeah, we're just gradually building up this blotchy sort of mottled pattern. I'm really happy with the way this is turning out actually, with that fading in the middle. So again, I don't want to bore you with it, but we'll just go through a few more bits. So that's the bonnet. And that would be faded on the top. Let's get the maximum sunlight on it, so we'll just do that. Possibly on top of them grills, no more than that on this one. And again, on here. Tops of the wings, almost definitely. The doors will be a bit paler than the rest. That edge. Tops of the headlights. And that's probably going to be about it for that. You're not going to see the top of that, but we'll do that in case she's driven that off. So again, it's just got that broken up look. It's not in your face, and pin washes will bring that out, but it's just that little bit of lightness. And then we're going to fade it from above in a second. So I'll just switch off for now and let that harden up a bit. So olive drab is known for being bleached by the sun, so I'm going to add even more yellow to that. Almost the last of me yellow, actually, as it turns out. So you get a really pale mix, and I might, if it's not light enough, throw in a bit of buff. Let's see what that looks like when it's mixed up. That's lighter again, isn't it? So I want that lighter, but also want it a lot thinner. So again, self-leveling thinners, just decant it into grappa bottles to make it a bit easier to deal with. So I want a really watery, almost like a wash to go over the top of this. So probably enough. I've already drained that, so let's give that a little bit of a wipe out. Not that precious about cleaning it in between these jobs. You just want to get the worst of that out. So, oops, switch on the compressor again, so be prepared for noise. More than I thought. Oops. Let's give that a bit of a squeeze into there. So we'll give it a quick flash through as well, just to save a bit of time. Might be some build up on the needle as well, so just won't do any harm to do that. And chuck some of this in here. So it's very watery, very, very pale, and that's what we're going for. So I'll just knock down that oomph on it. And I've flood it. It's significantly paler, and I wouldn't normally do it at this angle, but this is for the, I'm assuming you can see it because my foam clamp's there. So I'm just going to go over the top with that pale stuff, and that should blend everything in and avoid that stripy look. But you can see it's starting to pick up on the wings in the bed. On the top start, you're getting that pale bleached olive drab, which is what will happen when the sun hits it normally. So that's, might give it another, let that dry off, and give it another couple of passes of that, so that you will see some colour gradation later on when it's all right. Give it again. I'm trying to hold it at 90 degrees, the model, so you are just getting that, what you would get when the sun beats down on it, rather than faded from an angle. So I think we might be at a point where we'll call it a day. I'm just going to switch this off and clear the air to really blend it. So this one's got a bit of desert yellow thrown in, and even more thin, as you can see, it hardly covers anything at all. So it'll just be a case of and when it dries, we should see if that's given us the shade we want, which I think it will. So let's leave that there for now and wait for it to harden up, and we can see what it looks like when it's dry. Okay, so just a recap of where we are really. So the main truck is together and screwed onto the chassis, and hopefully this light will pick up where we've got these faded panels. So instead of that block of green we had originally, it's all, you know, you've got faded areas and dark areas, and shadows have been enhanced. So oops, that's fallen off for a reason. I'm not sure how well that that's focusing or picking up on the camera, but I'm hoping you can see it's lost that monosyllabic sort of tone. Now I've kept the grille loose, partly so I can paint that radiator black if I need to, but also I've got access to the headlights to paint them silver and put the lenses on when I need to. And obviously the canvas top's loose so I can put the seats and the driver in. The canvas top, I just sprayed the colour I used as the overall wash across the top of this when I did that. So that faded colour, I just kept it in the airbrush and built up on that canvas till it had that colour. So when I say ties in, it's not exactly the same colour because it's only a faded wash on the top, but it's not harsh and grating when you compare it to the overall colour of the model. Now, if I hadn't primed that in advance, I wouldn't be able to do that because it's too thin to stick to plastic, but with the primer it was able to cling to it, so that's worked out all right. The tarpaulin in the back has been brush painted with watery glazes of Humbrol. It's a sand colour and a bronze green. I quite like brush painting these, actually. They do brush paint really well. So again, that was just to give it a different colour to the rest. It's all hard on that paper shaper now, and the wheel drops into that little recess I've got, so that locks itself in place. So it looks like it's sunk into the canvas, which is the effect I was looking for. What else? Wheels, I've had a satin coat to start weathering them. And for that, I used something new to me. Let's pick that up, all the clunking and banging. So I used VMS satin because it was recommended on a forum somewhere. Is that focusing right? Yeah, it is now. It says it's airbrush ready, but on my 0.3 needle it was a bit thick. But I also bought their airbrush thinners on the off chance. Come on, focus. On the off chance. Yeah. There you go. On the off chance I did need to thin it, which I'm glad I did. So that's okay. Seats, I'm going to paint a sort of red brown, so they look like red brown leather. There's no reason they shouldn't be green, but it just gives a bit of colour to the model, otherwise it gets a bit bland. Jerry cans have been brush painted, so again, I don't know how clear it looks on the photo, on the video, but that's a darker green than the olive green. I've used this stuff, the Humbrol acrylics, on that. Logic being that I very much doubt people wasted the time filling up jerry cans. They probably went to a store and exchanged an empty for a full, so they wouldn't be the same colour and they wouldn't match. And again, it just adds a bit of visual contrast to it. So that's about it for this bit. Next, it needs a gloss coat over the whole lot so I can decal it, which I'll do in a minute off camera. And I'm going to switch off the camera quickly and just put the rusty finish on the exhaust as said we do. I'm not going to do all of it because you're not going to look underneath. I'm just going to do that tip where it sticks out the side of the vehicle and you see it. So that'll be my next thing on camera in a minute. And then I'll do that, gloss coat it, then I'll have to wait for a day, but you'll see it in seconds then, ready for decaling. Okay, so we're ready to rust up the exhaust now. When I find it, there's the exhaust. And I say it's just going to be this tip on the outside. So what I've got is an old tin of Humbrol matte black enamel. And I'm using that really because it doesn't dry as quickly as acrylics or lacquers, so you've got a bit of working time. Then a selection of pigments, so that's iron oxide, rust. The Humbrol ones I find are quite coarse in pigment size, so they're ideal for this where you want a bit of texture, but you haven't got the refinement. Some of the ones I've got CMK light rust, a black smoke, and sand. And all I intend to do is paint the end of this with the black, and while it's still wet, start working the pigments into it until I get a sort of rusty-esque finish. it might wander off camera because I need to see what I'm doing, but we'll give it a go. So we'll start off by, this has already been stirred. I'm about to add a bit of enamel thinners because it's quite an old pot and it had dried out a little bit. It's gloopy enough for what we want, so whack it on nice and thick because rust swells the metal anyway, so the finish will be like that. And while that's still wet, get that out of the way quick, just start picking up pigments and dusting them in at random. It doesn't matter what goes where, you want that uneven. Finish. Just rust and crud building up on it. And don't forget, this is going to be buried underneath a coat of mud as well, so it doesn't have to look perfect at this point, just has to have that iron oxide-y look. Sooty black around the tip. And yeah, I'm aware this is a good way of ruining a nice paintbrush, but I will wash it out properly. Right, that should do. I don't know how well that's going to focus, but you can see you've got that sort of crusty, sort of rusty stained look, and because it's sticking to that paint, that will stick with it. It doesn't matter, we've got bits of it going over the exhaust as well. That's fine. That's not going to affect us in the slightest because we're not going to see that, and we haven't painted it. If we did, it should have a bit of surface rust on it. So yeah, hopefully that stands out well on the camera, so you can see the sort of finish we've got quite quickly. So the next thing to do with all of this is put that to one side gently till it let it dry. Lid on that because I'm bound to knock it over, and because pigments go everywhere, what I'm going to do is get everything that had anything to do with the pigments, wrap it up in the paper towel, and just bind it all up so it doesn't go everywhere. And that's going to go straight in the bin, and the glove's going to go straight in the bin because that's contaminated. And then I'm going to wash my hands before I even go near that model again, because the slightest trace of pigment there is going to just go everywhere. So that's just all out of the way now, without contaminating the bench. So I'm going to get all that washed, get a gloss coat on that. That should be dry in 24 hours, then we can insert that. But yeah, I'm quite happy with that multifaceted sort of rusty look you've got. So everything should be good to go next time you see it. Okay, so it's just a quick update of where we are. So since you've last seen this, I'd finished pre-shading, and I'll include a photo around here of what it looked like when it was finished. I was quite happy with the results. It got that sort of faded panels I was looking for. Since then, it's had a gloss coat on and it's been deckled. I glued the bonnet on and then instantly realised I still haven't painted the headlights to put the lens on, so I peeled that off just in time, which is a bit of luck. I've painted the seats just a sort of ruddy brown colour. This is AK, is it third generation? It doesn't spray well, but it brush paints really nicely. So I just wanted some sort of generic leathery brown colour. It'll need a second coat. It's a bit streaky, but that's fine. Those brush lines will fade away, so they'll be dealt with later on. I've played around in the back with pigments just to see what I could do with them really, and a few oil stains. It was a quiet night, so I'll need to give another gloss coat in a minute to seal these decals in, but I'll just mask that off with a bit of tissue so that doesn't get affected, because I'm quite happy with the way that's gone. And what I'm waiting for now is I've just painted in the little red lights and convoy lights on the back. That one looks a bit messy, but the dust will hide that. And orange on the side and front there. So all I've done is used your Tamiya gloss red, which is quite a dark, deep red, which works quite well with that. For the orange, I only had a quite a bright orange, so I've used that, then dulled it down a bit of red, so I get a subdued orange on the sides. Cherry cans are glued on. Again, they were painted a slightly different colour. I've brush painted a buff colour for the straps to hold it down. So this is ready for another gloss coat, or it will be once the orange and red has dried. And the other thing I did at the back was weathered up the spare wheel, which I'm going to throw in the load bed. I'll throw in the load bed now so you can see how it looks. So I predominantly did it on that one because I just wanted to, it's been a while since I've done mud effects and just wanted to sort of play about and practice. So what I'm going to do now is get the main wheels weathered and muddy, because these will be weathered in a slightly different way to the main body, so these will be far more dirty, so they don't correspond to having to do gloss coats and things. So what I'll do is get one of these set up, show you how I did it, then do the rest off camera so you know the process I went through. So you'll see me in a minute set up ready to go. Okay, so we're kind of set up ready to go. Pigments are messy as anything, it gets everywhere, it's all over my hands already, so I always put a bit of paper towel down before I start anything, and that might affect the white balance a bit. But I've got a couple of colours with this MIG, was it Gulf War sand, so it's just a buff colour. Then I've got a medium earth and a dark earth, European dark earth. It's just to give the sort of coloration mix I needed. And what I'll do is I'll put a little drop of tap water in here, and it is just normal tap water, just keeping that because I haven't got a sink in the room I'm in. Now what I've found in the past is Humbrol Decal Fix, which is this stuff, is pretty rubbish for holding decals onto models. Well, I found it, so anyway, I can't see the purpose of it. But, and this isn't my idea, it was one I got off YouTube somewhere. If you put a few drops of that into that water, it'll act like a glue and fix the pigments in place when it dries. But if you want to remobilize it, water will dissolve that. So if you make a right mess of it, you can wipe it off again. But it does hold the pigments on there fairly rigidly. So I've started going with that as a way of doing things, and it's a use for this that does work. So all it needs is that amount of water. That's probably more than you need actually, and that'll be enough to glue the pigments in place. It's what I've used on the back of this deck here, and you can rub that and they stay in place. So it does work, but it keeps them matte and it keeps it looking nice. So the first thing we need to do is mix a paste of probably one of the dark earth colours. So where's my little pipette I've just put down? Let's do that. Won't need all of that water in one go. I'm going to make several sort of muds of this. So get that, and there's no real science behind this. I'm just guessing as I go. Chuck a bit, making a right mess of that. I should just drop the pigment straight in now. I was trying to be clever and keep it separate so you could see what I had. That's a bit thin. I need a bit more than that. I want this almost like a paste. let's not try to be too clever then. It was this light earth. Sorry, I should have just done that straight away. I just thought this might be a simpler way of. Yeah, I'm making right pigs here of this, but we'll carry on. That's the sort of thing I want, that sort of clingy, muddy, gloopy stuff. So I'll do for our first pass, and we'll just put lids on things so I don't make a right mess. The messiness is just part of pigments. So all I'm going to do with this is grab the wheel. I might put it on a little post to make life easier, and try and blob everything inside these little treads here. So it'll just be a case of, not be overly neat, but it's just a case of getting clumps. In every tread all the way around. So I'll get on and do that off camera so I can get this out. Okay, so that's it took a couple of seconds really in real time. So every little indent in the tread has got some of that brown dark earth. It's run over a bit, and it doesn't matter, and it's a bit on the tyre tread, but we're going to be able to clean that up. Sorry, I was off camera there. That's why I've let's bring the camera back a little bit. Sorry. That's why I've used this decal fix so I can reactivate it, water, and clean up the areas. But then that same mud is going to be sort of where it's going to collect in around the wheel rims here. So then what I'll probably do at this point is get some, I need a little scoopy stick that I'll have to do, get some of the dark earth, and while it's still wet, just sprinkle it on. I'm not being particularly neat or perfect with that. I just want it on because nature's not neat and perfect. It won't be uniform all over it. So that should, in theory, cling to the wash already down and just leave a bit of a messy, lumpy thing. So if we just tap any excess off this at the moment, we've got this sort of muddy build-up in the centre of the wheel. We've got mud in the tyre treads, and it's a bit grimy and grubby. So the other thing we also want to do is think about starting to lighten stuff up a bit. And this is where I'll just have to switch off the camera a second and tidy things up. So I've mixed up a watery sort of sludge of this lighter sand colour, and I'm just going to then put this on the rims here. I'm not letting things dry between. You're seeing this pretty much as it's happening. Are you seeing it? Am I off the camera? Sorry. It's awkward to sort of see what I'm doing here. So that'll just sit around the rims. We can blob bits of it on that brown we've just done, so there's lighter patches in there as well. And with this, it's going to fly outwards as the wheel spins, so we can start to manipulate that. So we're getting streaks that fly to the outside edge of the wheel. It's all guesswork, there's no rhyme or reason with this. And then put a bit more in the centre because it looks like it's lacking. And then some of this lighter mud will be on the outside in places, but it's not going to be everywhere. We'll just dot that on because, again, we're not going to necessarily have a uniformity. It's not like a paint finish, it's just where it's splashed and sprayed. So we'll just dab that down, put bits of it around the centre, So you thin that out. Potentially go in and make a supplementary mud out of those two. So you get a third different shade. Start to dab that in places so it's drying in places as it goes. At the moment that's looking a bit blurred. I'm not too worried about these interfaces, there should be, but I'm lazy, and you're going to look at the outside of the model effect. I don't even paint the wheel rims on the inside. I just leave that black, so that's what you'll see, but I'll splurge a bit this about just for effect. We're going to wipe a lot of it off anyway, just in case anyone does gaze. But there's no steering on this. The wheels are always going to be straight ahead. So that's what we end up with at the moment. So what I need to do is let that dry so I can give it a wipe over. You always get a clean bit in the center of the tyre, so we need to wipe that. Need to wipe that outer rim. Then when that's done, potentially put another coat of this on to give it a bit of ingrained dirt, and just generally play with it till we're sorted. Then when that's all dry, we can muck about with some washes just to try and highlight it a bit more with those. So let's let that dry. While that's drying, I'll get the other ones to this state so we're ready to go when we get going again. Okay, so that's the original wheel we did, sort of muddy and dry. These are just drying off now. I think the trick with it is not to brighten it works, actually I'm saying that with an air of confidence, is not to make everything too uniform. You want uniform splashes of colour on them because they've all been in the same environment, but you don't necessarily want the same pattern on everyone. Some of these I'll probably put a bit more of the lighter mud on the inside. It's not really showing up that well, but I'll get on to the next stage in a second. Just get a damp cotton bud and we'll be ready to part of the tyre, the rim, not the rim, the sort of contact point with the road, because obviously when I say this is fixed on with that decal fix, by the way, it's fixed on for a pigment. It's still quite loose. Obviously constant wear with the road is going to take any mud and grime off that. So all I'm doing is got the cotton bud, I'm just licking it to make it moist, and that's enough to activate what we've got on there. Just cleaning up that contact patch. So when you look at the tyre, you see mud ingrained in the treads, and when it's on the vehicle, you can pick the best bit. But it's clear where it's been rubbing on the road, as it would be. You wouldn't have. If you look at your own car tyres, they're it's polished with all the grime in the tread. So particularly this time of year with all the salt on the roads. So we've done that. The other area that is going to be clean is, for some reason, I think it's because of the flex of the tyre, this inner area here is generally clean on the tyre. I don't know why, but you look at any photo, the bit between the rim and the tread is generally free from grime. And I think that's where it gets its most flex, so anything just flakes off and it ends up with a sort of dusty coat, which we'll put on in a minute with oils rather than an actual muddy coat. So that's got the pigments off we want to get off. We've still left a conglomerate around the sort of wheel hubs. We've still got it in the treads. We can polish off the edge of those treads probably with your hands just as easy. So we're starting to get that sort of muddy look we had on that original one that's in the load bed. So I'll go and do that with the rest of them, then we'll come back with a few oils and then we'll start playing around. These will need to dry a little bit before I do it. Actually, they're still quite gunky, so I'll leave that another 5 or 10 minutes and come back when it's all done. Okay, so we're on to the final bit of the wheels. I've got some of these Abteilung oils. I've got a dust, an engine grease, and an earth. and they're similar colours to what I threw into the back of the bed, so it all blends together. And on this little palette there, I've got their odourless thinners, which is quite gentle on things. So let's pick a wheel, any wheel. So that one's been cleaned off. I haven't worried too much at the backs of them because on this you're not going to see it. The rear wheels are covered by mud guards anyway, and the front ones, yeah, you're only going to see that portion of it. The wheels don't turn. If it's a larger model, I might be inclined to. So first thing I need to do is get a couple of brushes. I've got that one and the one I used before. Let's use that. And I want to mix up a sort of watery wash of dust and bufflets. I'm going lighters first, so as that gets contaminated, it doesn't matter. So, get a bit of paper towel, probably need that. Just wiping off the brush, there's no big clumps on it. So I just want to get me cleanish thinners, and my head might come in shot there, sorry. Just moisten everything. And then get some of our watery mix of dust. Just wig that around the wheel rim. Hopefully that's still in shot. Wheel dry lighter, then we can get a bit of the old earth colour. Just while it's still wet, just dab that in as well, so it has to be everywhere. Then when you look at wheels, it tends to have all this dust radiating from the inside out, so we'll dry that brush off a little bit, the wider one we used. And then we just flick so you get a sort of pattern going out from the middle, and it's not going to be everywhere. It's just going to be, you'll just give a hint of it to your eye, it won't go wild. So that's sort of got some streaks flying outwards. Then we'll come back in with this one. Touch around the rim, so we've got a solid dirt pattern coming on. Just bring that out as well if you want to. And the only other thing we can do to tidy that up a bit is get some more of the odourless thinners and mix some engine grease and just dab that around a couple of the wheel nuts as though they've been greased before they've got on, and all the I've got a spare. We saw the effect where once it's been greased, when it's been serviced and gone out on the road, all the dust and muck's clung to it. So that's the sort of effect we're going for. So we don't need a lot of it. Again, just a bit on the end of the brush. And just touch it in random, so around that bearing cap maybe. It's almost like a pin wash around the bolts I'm doing. But Right, so I think we'll probably call that a day on that. So I'll get the rest of the wheels done, put them on the truck, and you can see what they look like. Under the wheel, the outside rim of the tyre a bit more, or I may not. Do I have a preferred side? Yeah, I think the other side looks a bit better, but that's the sort of overall thing. And the spare wheel that's going on the lorry, I've just given that an oil wash of dust, and that will be on the lorry when it's weathered because it's not ever affected by road movement. That is just going to be accumulated dust whilst it's sat under the lorry not being used. Let's try and lighten that a little bit. I don't like that. That may have done it. I think that was a bit too much there. Again, as I didn't bother with the inside edges of the wheels, simply because you can't see them in any way, shape or form. I think I still kept them black. I don't think I painted them green in the centres. So that's where we are. As I say, you should have seen some stills up showing it as is. So the next thing will be glossing the main body to seal the decals in, pin washes over everything, then a satin coat, then start with the dust. The roof I'll deal with differently because I want that as a different texture as it's a canvas roof. So I want that absolutely flat. So I've got some Vallejo matte varnish. It's dead flat, and I'll put that on that once I've given it a wash to get some of these creases showing and done a bit of dry brushing. So next time you see it, it'll be glossed and we'll be on to pin washing. Okay, the initial plan was to make a one-part video start to finish, but with the weathering, it's rolling on into a couple of hours long. So I'm going to try and split it up into two halves. So I'm going to end the first part at around now where we've got the wheels weathered and ready to balance on the truck. And the second part, which I'll upload immediately, it'll be the washes on the body, the weathering of the body, the final assembly, and some reveal photos. So this is the end of part one, and part two I'll be along with you in any second.